welcome to the Purlsbeforethyme knitting podcast. I'm Elise. Welcome back if you're a regular viewer, and welcome if you're new. So the lighting's a bit sunny, I hope that's okay. It's a really wonderful day here today. It's spring properly now this time. And I've been really into more summery knitting recently, so I'll just do a quick little current project update and then I'll get into the main subject of what I really want to talk about today. So as I'm more into the summer knitting, my magnolia bloom has been put on hold because that's very warm and thick and chunky. So I've made a lot of progress on my pie camisole, which is really getting close to being finished. So I finished the top of the neck and I'm just working on the body, and I keep trying it on to see how long I want it, and then I'll just do some ribbing and it'll be done. So very happy. This is in Pure Silk by Knitting for Olive and it's in the shade Quince. I had to acquire a third ball of this because I thought 2 would be fine, but actually I needed 3. So that's very fun. And then I also have cast on 2 new projects with sort of more summery yarn, and one of them I mentioned in my summer knits or patterns that I like, and this is the Hae Tee by Aegyo knit, and you can't see in this light because it's not right, but it's also hard to see in normal light anyway, but it's actually a stripy t-shirt in 2 colours, but the colours I've chosen are very low contrast. So I've chosen a shade called Linen, which is a sort of beigey sandy colour, and then a white, which is a bright white. So I think the original sample has like linen and blue. So this yarn is a quite tricky yarn to work with. I've never worked with it before. It's Trio by Aegyo, and it's cotton and linen and I'm gonna guess bamboo, I might be wrong, but another sort of plant fiber I think it is. And yeah, it's quite ropey and it tangles easily and the balls unravel very easily, so I was actually recommended by the lady in the shop to put them in little plastic bags so they don't get everywhere, and that was a very good tip. So thank you, lady in the shop who had advised that. So this is just the beginning of a sleeve, so it's worked from sleeve to sleeve and it's very oversized and cozy. And you start with just a tubular cast on, and then you knit some rib, and then you work in the broken rib stitch, and yeah, you work in different amounts of rows of different colors, and that's going to be very nice, I think. And then the second cast on is something I've actually had on my swatch board here for a while now, and it's something I've had on my list for this year. And I had the yarn for this in stash, so it was going to become this anyway. And it's also summery yarn, but held together with mohair. So this is also Aegyo. It's Her Organic, which is 100% linen in the color, this color, it's a brown color. And then I've held it together with a like moss green coloured mohair, and it's I haven't mentioned the pattern. The pattern is the Monaco vest by Annette Danielsen, and it's not on Ravelry, but it is on the Aegyo website. It came out as part of, they come out with collections, and when they launched this yarn, Her Organic, then they launched a series of patterns with a lot of nice designers, and this was one of my favorites from that collection. It's like even though it's got mohair in it, it's actually quite a sort of lightweight vest. It's kind of, I don't know, it's a little bit Edwardian in some ways, and I really like it. So I'm having fun with this, and it's kind of, I like the stitch pattern as well. It's kind of like a version of broken rib, but it kind of makes it like zigzag like an accordion, and I'm very fond of this and I'm having a lot of fun. So I have a lot of things that I can just pick up and work on at the moment, which is very nice. But the main thing I wanted to talk about today was actually, you know, I turned 30 last week, so, you know, big milestone. Then you kind of reflect on, you know, what you've done in that time. And I was thinking about when I started knitting and how much I've learned in that time since I started, and it's really quite an incredible amount. So what I thought I would do today is share 3 mistakes I made when I started knitting, and whether you're more experienced and can relate to this journey, or you're a beginner and you want like tips not to avoid certain things, yeah, please let me know if this is useful or if you've also experienced these things. So I think the number one mistake I made when I really got into knitting, so that's maybe 5 years ago, 6 years ago, I can't remember exactly. I got into crochet when I was doing my undergrad degree, and then I discovered yarn in a big way, and then I just wanted to do more with yarn, and yeah, I decided to take up knitting again, even though I knew how to knit. I hadn't really knit a lot, and then I was really drawn to being able to make a garment quickly. And the problem with that is I think it's very tempting to then go for big yarn and big needles, and I didn't really understand, or didn't really think about, I suppose, that obviously if you get bulky yarn that's quite heavy and you get thick needles, then you're going to end up with a very chunky, oversized sweater that's going to also be very heavy and then stretch. So I wasn't really thinking about durability or wearability so much. So the actual example pattern that I did, and you know what, I'm going to go out and say, I don't recommend anyone make this pattern. I think this garment isn't durable. I think it is kind of fun for 5 minutes, and then you're like, oh, okay. And the garment is a free pattern by Wool and the Gang. And disclaimer, I really like Wool and the Gang. I like a lot of their stuff, but I think one thing I don't like about them is that they really draw in beginners, because they offer like lots of colors and they're chunky and it's easy, but then a lot of the garments don't last. And I don't know, it's not something I really like. But anyway, the pattern I chose to make was the Wonder Wool sweater, which is a free pattern. I made it in a day, and it was just like you just knit pieces of stockinette and seam it together, but like the body is made on 25mm needles. They're like this thick, and the yarn I used was their Crazy Sexy Wool, which I also have an issue with, and I'll get onto that, which is all part of the same mistake, I suppose. And I ended up using like over a kilo of yarn for this thing, and I'll put a picture of what it looks like as well. And it's this really oversized thing, and I thought that would be a nice thing, but in the end it's actually very shapeless, and then it's very hard to style. You can see whatever you're wearing underneath it through completely because it's just so open. And yeah, sorry, my cat just wants to come inside, so I'm just going to go let him in and then I'll be back. Okay, he didn't really want to come in, he just wanted to say hi, which was very sweet as well. No, so anyway, you get this very open weave, and then you have this heavy thing, and then it just, as you wear it, it just gets longer, and it also takes up a huge amount of space. You can't just put it in a normal shelf. So I think within about a day of making this, I was like, oh, I spent all this money and I regret it immediately. And no one wants this thing. And it used to sit in the back of my office when I was studying for my PhD. And when the heating broke in that building, which it did regularly, that's when I would just, bring out this thing and just sit in my office where no one would see me in this really big, ridiculous pink marshmallow of a sweater. So that's the first mistake I made, really. And then kind of as part of that mistake is I used Crazy Sexy Wool, and it's a very fun wool. I'm not saying it's anything bad, and there are ways to use it nicely, but it's not very spun. It's, I would say, close to roving, which means that the fibers aren't twisted, they don't stay together very well, and as soon as you get any dirt on it, it's really hard to clean. The whole garment, if it's that heavy, was also super hard to clean. You would have to like try and brush it off. God forbid you get any kind of stains on it. So that whole experience really taught me a lot, and I learned a lot from this very failed sweater. So I've never done that again. I've never gone bulky. I've never gone like huge needles again. I think the biggest I've used since then is like 8mm. So calm down a lot on that. So I think that's a very easy mistake to make as a beginner, because you think, oh, I can make a sweater. It's an easy pattern. It's got all these colors I can choose from. I can do this without having too much technical ability, and you can. But what you get out of it is something you can not really wear. So that's a bit of a shame. Let me just remind myself. Yes. Okay. So that was my first big mistake. So if you've ever experienced doing that, then, you know, I relate very much to you. The second thing that I didn't really consider when I started was how color would affect texture. So I have mentioned this before, but I really liked Sarah Nolan's Sawyer sweater pattern. And it's a beautiful cabled sweater. And when she came out with this, she had made her sample in a yarn called Tweedy by Hedgehog Fibers, which is basically mainly one color, but with little flecks of like rainbow tweed through it, and it looked beautiful. I really liked this, but I couldn't get Tweedy where I was. Now you can, they've got it now, but it wasn't around then. And yeah, so I thought, well, instead of having like a base color with lots of rainbow flecks, why don't I get a speckled yarn with lots of rainbow speckledy flecks, and that will kind of do the same thing, except it didn't quite do that. So this is my sleeveless Sawyer that I haven't done anything with, but in some ways I'm very proud of this. The actual cable work is very nice, but I just think, you know, the speckles were too dense and they pulled funny, and yeah, I didn't like it at all. And in the areas where it was like a bit like fewer speckles, I liked it more. And yeah, so lesson from that is I think I might avoid doing too much colorful yarn with any kind of beautiful cable like this. Like, and also for this, I think I would have chosen a different yarn next time. So this was a superwash merino, and I think I would probably choose a non-superwash yarn and something that was a bit like airier in the way it was spun, like a woolen spun or something that really shows off the texture. But I mean, these are all things that you're not going to know until you try and learn. So that's something that, you know, I keep this. I can't frog this. I think this was so beautiful, and I have regrets when I see this. I do. But I'm also super proud of it at the same time, because like this was my first ever piece of like detailed cable work, and I think it was pretty good. So I don't know what to do with it. I keep it around. I don't know what I'm going to do with it, but that's my Sawyer, not sweater. But anyway, so that was the little lesson that I learned. And then the third sort of, not mistake, but I think it's something that I've learned now, is that, so when I started getting into knitting, I didn't want to be an acrylic user, just because, you know, I was like, okay, I come from a very sort of eco sort of background, really. So I have, you know, a degree in ecology, and I was like, oh no, plastic bad. And you know what? Then I was like, oh, I can understand why it would be useful in sock yarn to have a bit of nylon, because then obviously it wears longer, and that's actually more sustainable if you have products that wear longer. And understanding where I think, you know, acrylic is functionally very useful is something I've learned. So an example of where I regret not using an acrylic blend. So I don't think I would ever use full acrylic. no shame to anyone who does, honestly. Like, you do whatever you want. I think that was something when I started knitting, I was like, oh, you know, bit of a yarn snob. But now I'm just like, you know, it's much better that people are just having a good time and enjoying whatever yarn they have available to them. So one yarn that I used that I thought, oh, you know, if I had made this again, I would use something with acrylic, is my Aegyo sweater, which is this beautiful cable sweater by Aegyo knits, and it's really lovely, but it's in a blown yarn, and blown yarn is where they have like a kind of tube and then they blow fibers down it, and it's really soft and it's really nice. The only issue is that, as with that Wonderwool sweater, is that it does stretch a lot and it doesn't hold its shape in the nicest way. It kind of gets a bit, not stretched, but like it gets heavy and it falls funny, I think. And then obviously you can see the neckline is very big, that sort of grew. And that's one thing that acrylic really does prevent, is stretching to that extent. And I've seen other people make this, and they've made it in Puno by Gepard Garn, which is a yarn that actually does have a certain percentage of, I think it's polyamide, but yeah, non-natural fiber in it. And that is a yarn that I know doesn't stretch to the same extent. And I experienced this when I actually was designing one of my patterns. I designed a headband called the Milk and Honey headband, and the original one I made in a blown yarn by Knitting for Olive that they don't make anymore. It's called Double Soft Merino. And I don't know if it was a blown yarn, but it was a very sort of soft yarn. And I made one version in that, and it was really easy to just sort of make it a bit smaller than my head and then stretch it when I put it on, and that was really nice. And then I made another version in a yarn called Alpaca Brise, which has some acrylic in it, and I made it exactly the same length. I couldn't put it on my head. And I was kind of shocked, like, at the difference in the stretch. But I really think for a garment like this, if you want to keep everything, you know, looking really sharp, I think an acrylic yarn would be really, really good. So that is something I think that I've learnt over time, is that, you know, there are reasons to use acrylic, and you should use it, definitely, for certain types of things, and all things if you want. So yeah, that's what I wanted to cover today. So I hope you all enjoy knitting, and I have one more thing to say, and that is that these are things that I would consider like mistakes. They're things I could have maybe avoided or learnt faster. I don't consider things like, you know, knitting unevenly at the beginning a mistake, or like struggling with cast ons or making mistakes and not understanding how to read knitting. I don't think those are mistakes when you're a beginner. I think that is just part of the process. So that's why I didn't include anything like, oh, you know, I used to cast on too tight and now I cast on normally, because it's like, you know, I think everyone struggles with tension and gauge and understanding all these concepts, because it's so much vocab all at the same time. So anyway, that is my personal knitting mistakes. So yep, I hope you all enjoy the rest of your day, and I don't know how long it's going to be till I make another video. Hopefully not as long as it was since last time, we'll see. But yeah, anyway, I hope you all enjoy your knitting and have fun and don't make my mistakes. So that's all I had to say. Bye!